Hey there, welcome to my channel. I have a little story to share today that happened about 10 years ago. It was one of the coolest experiences I think I've ever had while living in a cabin in the woods like I do and have done for 20 odd years. The greatest things about living out here in the wilderness is that you just never know what kind of wildlife is going to pass by your door one day. One of the most memorable encounters I had was when a grizzly bear wandered by and was about 50 feet from my cabin and just sat there, sniffed the air. It was a massive, huge grizzly who I don't think he'd ever encountered a home before or seen many people, because he kind of just wandered through obliviously and hung out for a good 30-40 minutes, just wandering through down in my meadow, rolling around in the grass, kind of sniffing around a little closely, so I tried to scare him off. And eventually he wandered off. I have more on that story in another video I did a while ago, and that link is down below, so check it out. That was one that I will never forget, and that was just a few years ago. I've had bison come through the yard and go wandering by. They never came too close, but they were definitely out there. Every year I have black bears come by, and mostly in the fall, because they love digging up the anthills that are around here, so they'll do that usually. And sometimes there's definitely scat all over the place from bears. There was a lynx, or more than one lynx, I don't know, I can't tell them apart, that was here for a few years in a row. Actually, it was hanging out quite a while. There was lots of rabbits around those couple of years, so there was plenty of lynx around too. I had a wolf with an injured leg just a couple years ago hanging around here. I don't know whatever happened to that poor wolf, but hope it turned out okay for it. But yeah, I was hobbling around here for a few weeks anyways. But other than that, I don't see too many wolves around here. I also see lots of coyotes come by, foxes every once in a while, porcupines. Haven't seen too many of those in the last few years, thank goodness, knock on wood. Knack, knack, knack. It's handy to have wood pile behind you to knock on. And moose. I don't see moose too often. The moose are actually pretty elusive around here. They run off and they don't like to see people at all. They're not used to people. So I saw one go sprinting through with a couple calves and just in and out of the trees so quickly that I couldn't even blink, and it was gone. I didn't get a picture of it. I also had a muskrat hiding under my cabin one day. And the most recent visitor that I've had is bats. And I've been trying to get bats to my place for years, decades even. And finally, in the last couple of years, they've started to hang out in my bat house. So I've got a couple bat houses around here. They're just on the one that's in the cabin, which means bat poop on my deck, which I didn't really think about before. But anyways, I'm still happy to have them around because they are mosquito eaters. So like I said, I don't have many neighbors, but I do have one neighbor down the highway a bit who is a fantastic photographer. And she's taken a lot of photos of all kinds of wildlife around here. So if you see some pictures with the name Sue Thomas on them, that's my neighbor. And she's allowing me to use the pictures here. And I encourage you to go visit her website. It's yukonsites.ca. And she has a ton of pictures of not only just wildlife, but also the history of the Yukon. And thanks to Sue for letting me use her picture and video. Got some pretty cool video. The video you saw at the start was hers of the elk bugling. I hear the elk bugling all over the place in the fall, but I've never caught them on video doing it. So that's really cool to have. So this is about Yukon elk. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a history on Yukon elk. It's kind of an interesting story. In the 50s, elk were transported. They were brought up here from Elk Island National Park in Alberta in the 50s. And there was about 20 elk that they brought up here. They wanted to kind of relieve the pressure on the other animals, the other big game for hunting and stuff. And so they brought the elk up here. And then it was another 30 years when they brought some more elk up here. Fast forward to today, and we have about 300 elk in the Yukon. There's a couple different herds. There's one near Braeburn, and it's called the Braeburn herd. It's up the North Klondike Highway. And then the herd near me is called the Takini herd. I'm very lucky to have them as my neighbors. I mean, this is their wintering range where I am, and part of their core range. So it's kind of cool to be in that range where they're just here everywhere. I mean, they're here all summer. They're here in the winter. In the summer, they'll kind of go up to the hills and, you know, eat on the south-facing slopes in the spring. But you'll see them all summer long, all winter long on the highway. They do love crossing the highway, and that is one of the hazards of living out here, is that you never know where you're going to see them. So the elk are a large deer with a light brown coat. Their butts are kind of like a lighter cream color. They're a little bit darker in the shoulders and stuff. And they stand males are about 5 feet tall at the shoulders. Females, of course, are a little shorter. They weigh 660 to 770 pounds, the males. And the lifespan of the males is only about 12 to 14 years. Poor fellas. The girls, they live a lot longer. They can live up to 24 years. And one of the coolest things about them, I think, is their bugling. It's that high-pitched squeal that when I first heard it, I didn't know what the heck it was. When I moved out here, I hadn't heard elk a whole lot. And I just heard this high-pitched screeching. You don't know what it is because it sounds like it doesn't sound like an animal, or any sound that I've associated with an animal. And the males do that, and then the women the females will respond with like squeaks and whistles. So it's their communication is just fascinating. They're actually highly vocal for an ungulate, and the females will actually make these grunting noises if they're alarmed to warn the rest of the herd. The male have those big impressive antlers that can be massive. And it's amazing to think that they only grow, you know, they lose them every year, and they start to grow them in the spring, and throughout summer they grow them. And just in that short period of time, they can grow these massive antlers. And then you'll find, and I see these once in a while too, the elk rubbings on the sides of the trees. You'll see them rubbing the antler, just like that, rubbing the antler off in the fall. So they're also very sociable animals, and that's kind of a herd characteristic that is common for ungulates that are in the open areas. So now to the encounter, my encounter with the herd of elk. Living here at least a few years, and right now I have a perimeter fencing all the way around to keep out the more problematic animals like grizzly bears. But this was before I had that, so they could wander freely through. And the elk, all of a sudden one night, I heard a bit of noise outside. I heard some dogs barking of mine. I went outside, and to see all of these elk all over the place. They were up and down my driveway. They were all over in the trees. They were starting to make their way in the meadows. And it was just unreal to see that all of these elk were just hanging out. They were kind of like looking up. You'll see in the video that they were kind of looking up a little bit, but I don't know how long they'd been there, and they were just getting down to eating grasses, and eventually they started bedding down for the night. So they were making little beds for themselves, and overnight they just all slept here in the night. So there was about 50 of them hanging out in the yard, and just rummaging through the grass and hanging out. They were kind of like, it was interesting to watch them because they would get a little bit pissy with each other. And the video quality, because it was over 10 years ago, is actually really bad. So forgive me for that. But it's all I have of the footage from that night and that morning. So I watched the elk for probably hours that night, just kind of do their thing and get more and more used to me and the dogs. And eventually the dogs outside just didn't even bat an eye at them. They kind of ignored them. The next morning, they weren't even interested in them at all, which was hilarious to see. Because usually when something new comes through the yard, they're going crazy. But I also had a problem because I had a few dogs inside that I had to take outside the next morning to feed them and let them go to the bathroom. And they were going to chase the elk if they saw them because they were pretty excited about them. So I didn't give them a chance to do that. Of course, I didn't want the elk to be stressed out and chased away. So I put the dogs on a leash one at a time and walked them outside. And some of them were really comfortable with coming really close to my place. You'll see that one was really curious and came up almost to right where my vehicle was and was looking right at the cabin. And a couple others did that as well, but most of them kept their distance. So yeah, then I got up the next morning and I looked out my window and I could see from the loft window that there was still elk in the yard. They were just kind of getting up, having their morning feed. And were hung out for a couple hours that day. I think for half the day they were around, and then they just kind of moseyed on and went to the next meadow to get new grasses and poop in. It was one of the things that they left behind, was all their crap, which wasn't great. But anyways, that was my story of the night the elk visited my yard and hung out, and I felt a little bond, a little kinship with the local elk. They could trust me and hang out in my yard. It was really cool. It hasn't happened since. May never happen again. You never know. Probably not, because I have my fencing up. Although they have jumped it. Not all of them, but there's been a couple elk in here for sure. And a moose ran over my fence one day too. But other than that, the elk just really don't hang out here anymore. But I'm happy to say that, you know, I did see that. I witnessed that, and I hung out with them. And what a cool night that was. It was just magical. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to see more about the wildlife that I encounter, the things that I do around here, a lot to do with wood chopping, getting wood for the winter, surviving through 40 below, 50 below temperatures, playing with dogs, roaming around the woods, you name it, we do it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.